Welcome to TechFlik. This is my first experience cleaning my PC parts and I thought I'd share it with you all. Let's roll the intro. Alright, so I first experienced cleaning my PC parts during my home theater PC build, and if you have not watched it, I basically unbuilt the PC parts from my 7-year-old PC and I rebuilt it into the new smaller case. If you're interested to watch it, links are at the top and in the description down below. Now let's run through all the PC parts I pulled up from my 7-year-old machine. The 3 fans I have here are still usable, but they are pretty dusty, especially on the fan blades, so we are gonna focus on that. The I/O shields and SSD looks less dusty, so I guess we can just wipe the exterior and it should be fine. Next, looking at my motherboard, we are gonna focus on the dust buildup on the PCIe slots, on the VRMs too, and overall the exterior of the motherboard. My DDR3 RAM still looks okay, so we are just gonna give it a wipe. Onto the CPU cooler, probably the most dustiest components in this build. There are dust filled in between the heatsink fins, including the blades on the cooler fan. I think the best thing to do here is to remove the CPU cooler from the motherboard and focus on cleaning it. There is also dust buildup visible on the power supply fan area and some dust on the exterior, so we have to take note of that too. Now that we have identified the components and the areas that we should focus on, I actually turned my kitchen into a cleaning area. Don't mind the sleepers, please. Alright, so before we begin cleaning, here are some of the items that I have prepared. First is this thin brush, really useful to reach those stubborn areas. I've also included a dry toothbrush, preferably a toothbrush you no longer use. I bought a box of alcohol swabs. These contain 100 swabs with 70% isopropyl alcohol. I got them for $5.40 in Singapore, and it's great for removing thermal paste. And of course, I have my screwdrivers with plenty of interchangeable heads ready. Besides that, I also prepared a hairdryer and some serviette on hand. I also have this pretty awesome vacuum cleaner which can turn into a blower simply by removing it to the rear hole. Something to take note of here is that there are plenty of people that will advise against using a vacuum cleaner or a blower like this, as using a vacuum can create static electricity that might damage your PC components. So do this at your own risk. They do, however, recommend either getting a canned air like this or a data vac if you can afford one. But for me personally, I did not encounter any issue using the vacuum cleaner. Now let's get the items out of the way and let's start with the cleaning. So first, we're gonna start with disassembling the CPU cooler. I removed the fan first, followed by unscrewing the brackets that's holding the heatsink. Removing the heatsink, we find this dried up thermal paste. They feel pretty rubbery like a blue tack. Now this heatsink needs a really good clean. The thermal paste applied previously, as you can see here, has dried up and this is quite bad. This will result in barely any contact from the heatsink and the CPU, and we're gonna have it clean and reapply a new layer of thermal paste. Next, I removed the DDR3 RAM from the slots. They are actually not in a bad condition. I'm just gonna wipe it down a bit. Now that the CPU cooler and the RAMs are off, using the thin brush, I wipe out the corners, the PCI slots, and any cracks in between. I then use a blower pointing at a 45-degree angle to blow the dust as I brush it off. I went through this process for roughly 5 times, making sure I get most of the dust out. Using the alcohol swabs, I wipe the thermal paste off, and the alcohol swab really helps in loosening the thermal paste, making it easy to remove. Once that is done, I proceeded with the CPU cooler heatsink. Here, I used a toothbrush to reach for dust in between the fins. I made use of the vacuum to suck in the dust as I brush. I then used the alcohol swab to remove the thermal paste. I find that using the alcohol swab is pretty effective in removing the thermal paste. I then finish it off with a serviette for the final touch. Unfortunately, as you can see here, with all that brushing, there is still some dust that is still hard to reach in between the fins. In the end, I had to prepare a pail of soapy water and dip the whole heatsink in. Now we are just gonna leave the heatsink in there for a while I continue to clean my other components. We will be back with it shortly. Next, we are gonna clean the fans. So a total of 4 fans, 3 case fans and a CPU cooler fan. I alternate between the toothbrush and the thin brush to remove the dust accumulated on the fan blades. I did both the front and the back of the fans. I also made use of the blower this time to get rid of all the dust. Using the vacuum also helps. I repeated the same process until I was fairly satisfied with the cleaning results. For the power supply, I had to take extra precaution as I do not want to accidentally touch any of the capacitors inside. Do note that even if they are unplugged from the power source, the capacitors can still carry electric charges, and this might pose an electrical hazard. I unscrewed and removed the fan grill, and I gently wiped the dust off from the fan using the brush. To ensure that all the dust is rid off, I used the vacuum to suck the dust off. While doing this whole process, I made sure not to accidentally touch any components inside the power supply. Once that is done, I screwed back the fan grill, and here I wiped the exterior with a serviette, or you can also use a dry cloth. Now that is all done, let's not forget about the heatsink. Taking it out of the pail, I find that most of the dust in between the fins has loosened up, and yes, all the dust are gone. I then took the heatsink to dry it off using the hairdryer. Be careful not to hold or handle the heatsink while drying it with a hairdryer, as the heatsink absorbs the heat pretty quickly. It can get very hot. Here you can see me putting the heatsink on my marble countertop and using the hairdryer to blow hot air around it. And that's it for the cleaning. Now let's compare and take a look at the results. Alright, that's it for this short video that I would like to share. I hope to learn and clean my components more often. Maybe we can include a graphics card next and see how to clean them. Overall, I think cleaning is a great way to maintain your component, and it's kind of like a spa for your PC components. So let your PC build take some time off from all that hard work. I hope you find this video interesting or maybe useful. I think for the first time I did a pretty good job at cleaning and removing most dust from my components. What do you think? Do let me know in the comments down below. Also, I would like to know how often do you clean your PC and what are some of the steps that you took. As always, if you like what you see, click the like button. If you love what you see, subscribe for more future tech content. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, this is TechFlik signing out.